If you haven't been able to tell by my accent in earlier videos, I am not from Texas. I'm from Wisconsin, and I moved here in February 2021. As I explored Waco, I noticed signs near the edge of the road that said, "Texit now." For the first few weeks, I honestly thought it had something to do with texting and driving because the signs were so close to the road. But one day it clicked. Texit, like Brexit, an independence or secession movement. Duh, Rachel. I'm not going to take a stand on Texas secession, but I'm going to use it as an example. In our last video about pizza, we learned that you have to know what your questions are before you can find the information to answer those questions. Well, what if you don't know what questions to ask? Or what if your instructor told you to explore a topic, but your mind is already made up on an issue? Or what if you've been told that your topic is too broad? This is where a concept map or mind map is very helpful. In a concept or mind map, you write your broad topic in the center, and then you write questions you have about it around the center. If you don't have any questions, you can write subtopics of that larger topic. You keep branching off until you cannot think of any more questions or subtopics. I'll admit, I know very little about Texas secession. My first question was, why? Why do some Texans want to secede? This will be our first branch. I read some articles and learned that unhappiness with the federal government is a big reason. But culture plays a huge role too. Texas has a history of independence, and Texans have a lot of pride in themselves and their state. My next question was, can they do that? Could Texas legally secede from the United States? Are there laws about that? What do those laws say? It turns out in 1869, the Supreme Court ruled in Texas v. White that states cannot secede. So if that is the case, my next question was, well, how do secession supporters pressure lawmakers to secede anyway? My next question was, well, if Texas somehow figures out how to successfully secede, what would happen? What would the effects be? Taxes immediately came to mind. Texas doesn't have any state income tax, so they would probably have to implement one. And what would happen to the state government? If Texas became a country, would the counties become states? How would the state government transition to a federal government? Speaking of the feds, how would Texas make up for the federal funding it would no longer receive? What would happen to the economy and trade relations? How would Texas handle its borders? Would it have some kind of national security force? Finally, the last question I had about Texas secession was, wait a minute, didn't they try this once before? I did know that Texas had been an independent nation briefly in the 19th century. And then, of course, there was the Civil War. But I did not know about the Davis Mountain standoff in the 1990s or the modern Texas nationalist movement. All of these branches around the center are great topics for a paper, and many of them could be broken down even further into more detailed questions. What's really cool is that you will start to see connections between different branches on the map. For example, a really interesting question occurred to me while I was working on this map, and I think it would make a fascinating paper. The question is, what, if anything, can the economy of the 19th century Republic of Texas tell us about the potential economic impacts of a 21st century secession? This question combines aspects of the history and effects branches. Finally, if the mind map isn't for you, you can narrow your topic by asking yourself, who, what, where, when, and why, as described in this table. Whom does this topic affect? What perspective will you examine this topic from? Where will you look at the effects of this issue? Will you examine it in modern times or at some point in the past? Why does this topic matter? Feel free to take a screenshot of the table and save it for future reference. And that's all for this mini lesson. Thanks for watching and be sure to check out the other videos.